Hello, it's Tuesday, so I will be going into Terrace of the Endless Spring today, as that's a new thing that's open. It's the last raid for Raid Finder of this first set of raids for the expansion. How am I getting my... Oh, right, because everything else has that password, and this one has that password, because the password drama. So, yeah, I kind of made a mistake. Not really a mistake. It's one of those, like, what the heck did I just get myself into? But I will never regret it. It's just sort of like, okay, this was not necessarily a well thought out decision. I bought from the iTunes store. That's not the regrettable decision. That's where I buy all my music. So, I bought a song that I knew that I liked. I still like. I love to death. But, for some reason, it gets me ridiculously emotional. You know, and some people are like, oh my god, is it Philip Phillips' Home song? No. Well, that does get me emotional, but that's not the song. Is it anything like Adele? No, it's not anything by Adele. It's actually a Star Trek song. And it's not even a main theme. It's the Inner Lights suite. The orchestral suite from the Inner Light. It's the song that Picard made on the tiny little flute thing while he was reliving an entire lifetime on a planet that was already extinct for a probe, blah, blah, blah. The episode is called The Inner Light. I'm going to find it on YouTube because I know people have done it with the proper licensing and stuff. I'm not going to play it because I'm not sure if I have the right licensing. So I'm going to link to someone that does have the right licensing so you can listen to it for yourself. And, you know, it's like 6.5 minutes long, and, you know, for those of you that may not be old enough to understand what orchestral suite means, there's no words. And there are some high notes, because it's basically played on a piccolo. At least the part that Picard plays. Anyways, so yeah, which, as I was taking my shower earlier, I was listening to that song, because once I downloaded it at iTunes, it immediately started uploading to my cloud drive. So, yeah. So once I got done doing that, I went into the shower and I listened to it. And, well, aside from the look on my face, you couldn't tell that I was crying so much because, well, I was already in the shower and there was already water pouring down my face anyways. But I'm fine now that the song's over. While it's playing, I'm incredibly emotional. So, one of those weird things. It might be, you know, some childish memory of something from that, you know, got embedded in there, or it's the nature of the song that it'll do that to pretty much anyone, or it's the fact that, you know, I have intense emotions being Asperger's, and whereas everyone else will be like, oh, that song, it just leads me to constant crying. In that case, it's basically forcing a meltdown, and that's an interesting concept in and of itself. But, you know, and it wasn't the first time I listened to it when I started crying, but I listened to it over and over because it's one of those that it's just long enough and different enough in like 3 parts that you don't know when it recycles, so you can put it on repeat. Got that dry cough, it's gross. So yeah, I'll be jumping into Terrace of the Endless Spring and the other 2 Heart of Fears. I did get my 496 legs off the Shaw of Fear today, so that's a plus. I don't know where I'm going to use my coins. I could just always save them for next week, because Thanksgiving this week, I'm not even sure people are going to be successful in their raid finders, because people are on vacation, yada yada. You know, works that sort of way with even with a regular. I don't want to make that WoW's job, but yeah. So I thought, you know, while I was in the shower, I was reflecting on things that have influenced me. Whether or not they influenced me, as an Aspie, or being gay, or whatever, I think that these are the kind of things that influence anyone. And they will influence them roughly all the same way. One of them is Star Trek. I have very vague memories of the first season when Mom was watching it, but Mom was hooked. Mom watched it when she was, she probably watched it mostly with people with syndication. She watched the original series. Or, most people didn't have televisions back then. That's partly why it, Anyway, so she watched it with syndication. She got really hooked on it. And then here she is, I'm around. Almost gave away my mom's age. And so she's watching, and here comes a new Star Trek out of, left field. And so she gets ridiculously excited and happy and crazy and starts watching it. And, my sister is, I think she was in preschool at the time. Maybe. I don't know. So what are you going to do with that? She's probably way off in her room, or she was sleeping, depending on when it came on. But since I was born in 1981, and that was 87, and most likely fall of 87, because that's when, fall thing starts, that I was 6, which is right about that time when things are really impressionable. I've seen this in other kids. So, yeah, it gets, you got a 6-year-old, and if you inundate them with one thing, I'm not saying, to forcefully manipulate your child, or a kid you happen to be around a lot, but right about 5, 6, 7, that's sort of like when most people have memories that start, and they can gradually recall through a good chunk of their life. I know my first grade teacher. I know which school I went to because I went there for 4 years. I know where it is on a map and stuff. I could also, knowing where things are on a map is kind of a moot point with me. I know where a lot of things are on a map, even if I don't remember ever being there. But Mom says, "Oh yeah, this is where you went to daycare when you were 3." Oh, okay. Immediately remembered where it was. So, that worked and all that. So, Star Trek was a major influence. Whether or not I actually watched it, or it was on too late for my bedtime, or whatnot, I watched it as a kid. I have barely any memory of those actual episodes, probably because I re-solidified the memory of those episodes later in life. Like, when they would be on repeats when I was like 10. But I remember when Best of Both Worlds aired. I don't remember what day it was. I don't remember, hell, even what year it was. But I remember, asking Mom, what's that mean? What's that mean? So I've been influenced by Star Trek my entire life, pretty much. And it's not going to go away. And even later, when I did get to see Star Wars, when some of Dad's friends' kids came over and watched it, I was like, wow, this is pretty cool, but I wasn't enamored by it. I mean, it had, I was young, so all sci-fi was cool, because Star Trek was cool. But now I'm not against Star Wars, I just prefer Star Trek. Like I said in, Friday's, one of my previous videos, the only thing I'll pay theater prices for is to go see anything involving Star Trek. I don't care if, Episode 7 for Star Wars is going to be, slated as the best movie of all time to topple Avatar and make Titanic sink a 3rd time. It could be the greatest movie. I'm not going to go see it because I don't care that much. I care enough about Star Trek. So, later, in the 90s, when Deep Space Nine was already starting up, and I was really into it by then. I was really into Star Trek. And so Deep Space Nine was starting up, and I was really interested in that. And then Mom wanted to, and then I saw television previews for Babylon 5. And most people don't even know what the heck that is. Because they're like, they're really into sci-fi, and they call themselves sci-fi junkies, but they've never heard of Babylon 5 or Farscape. They're sci-fi junkies because they've heard of the name Star Trek, they have seen all the Star Wars movies, they've maybe seen some Star Trek episodes, but they get the proverbial internet Woody over Firefly. So they're sci-fi nuts. It's sort of, it's strange to hear people talk about things like that when it's like, you have basically no knowledge of it, but you're a nut over it. And perhaps that's just the Aspie nature that, when I find something I'm really interested in, I learn everything about it. But, and I've asked recent friends that still friends, even, I don't want to say the boyfriend's opinion because I'm not exactly sure what it is, but he'd never heard of Babylon 5 before. He'd seen Firefly, he'd seen Serenity, he'd seen some Star Trek, and he'd seen the Star Wars movies. But he said he heard a musing in the whispers of the wind about Babylon 5, but he'd never actually seen it. So I sat him down, and we watched it. We found the first 2 seasons on Hulu. I tried to make a friend in Florida watch it, and he was blah, 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 and then by the he just got really bored of it really fast, and I was like, dude, you didn't give the story time to cultivate. Well, it was taking too long. Whatever. So, because I wasn't there, sitting over his shoulder watching him watch it. So, I couldn't, whereas I could with the current boyfriend, I could, let's watch this together, and he was way more interested, at least for the first season and a half, to be doing something with me that was interesting. By the end of season 2, he was bugging me. Can we watch Babylon 5? Can we keep going? So, I had seasons 3, 4, and 5 on DVD, so that was also that. We didn't have to rely on Hulu or anything to get our stuff after the second season, so we could watch whenever we wanted. So, but back to 93. I was interested in watching Babylon 5 because it looks really cool, and that was CGI graphics. And that's part of the thing people don't realize is they look like, oh, these CGI graphics are actually mediocre. Yeah, they're mediocre for now. They were amazing back then. Star Trek, and Star Wars were still using models. Babylon 5 made use of computer-generated graphics. And not like, computer-generated graphics where it's like, the ship sitting in orbit, or the station in orbit around Epsilon 3. No, like they had whole entire fight sequences that would take place for half the episode. And they were all CGI. And they were done in like 95. Most people watching this right now, if you're old enough to have had a conscious thoughts in 1995, you didn't have internet. And if you did, it was the slowest thing on the planet. Cable internet didn't come around towards the country till the end of the 90s. When I was in high school. 1995, God, people were still racing for 28.8 baud. Or whatever. You had to have 28.8 or you couldn't do this online, blah, blah, blah. And then there was that intermediate step of 36, and then there was 54. And if you had 54, you were on top of the world. That was the age of the internet there, folks. And we have a weekly running television series using computer graphics. Doesn't seem like a big idea now. I mean, Once Upon a Time does it all the time. Lost did it. Yeah, well, they didn't do it all the time, but Lost did it. They used the smoke monster, and and there's current sci-fis that are doing it. You know, Stargate. Stargate ran for 10 years. And, you know, while it was the same thing over and over, they used the Stargate caboose every single time. You know, it had to have been added in later. Eventually it turned into computer graphics, especially when they got them around to the Supergate. Sidetrack, anyways. So I got into Babylon 5 because it seemed really interesting. And I sat through it because it was more sci-fi. It was more things to learn. I didn't care about the weirdness. So I got really into that, and Babylon 5, and the boyfriend will attest, has probably shaped who I am as a person. You know, I don't know how many people can say their entire life was shaped, their life and core beliefs and how they view the world were shaped by Firefly. But you can say that about Star Trek, you can say it about Star Wars, and you can say it about Babylon 5. Because that's what it was. That's what it is. It's not running right now, it was, but that's it. It has, so it's you know, it's a 5-year book, because the entire story was written by J. Michael Straczynski to be a 5-year series. So if a storyline isn't wrapped up by the end of season 1, guess what? It's going to continue into season 2, because it's not like, you know, you know, the whole thing. And sometimes a story can start at the beginning of season 2, but won't end until the end of season 4. You know? Meanwhile, you've got something that was started in the first episode and doesn't end until the midway through season 3. Yada yada. You know, it's just that arcs and story arcs upon arcs, you know, and sometimes some arcs feed off other arcs, and it's just, you know. Anybody who watches this, if you can find it, I know. I said yesterday, I don't torrent, or the other day, I don't torrent, because I actually, you know, I'm a consumer and will pay for my things. Hulu had some sort of, you know, I actually checked with the boyfriend when we watched it. Hulu has something, had something involving the use of rights to reproduce for seasons 1 and 2. So we were fine watching it, because they had commercials and ad revenue and they paid and all that happy jazz. And I own it on DVD, so I watch it at my house in private viewings, like the FBI warning says. I might be the only person that follows the FBI warning. But anyways, so if you want to torrent it, go ahead. Just don't tell me, because I will feel bad. You know, I will feel bad that someone, you know, and it's a double-edged sword. It's like, so I get to, you know, I can freely share this with other people. Yes, you can. You can freely share it with other people. Because, you know, you should. Everyone should know about this. Everyone should know about Babylon 5. It is a milestone in sci-fi history. And some people don't get it because they've never heard of it. It was a small little series. It ran on UPN for 1 season and then got moved to the Primetime Entertainment Network on TNT, PTEN. And yeah, so it got moved to cable. That's the reason when we moved up to be closer to my dad's work, that's the reason Mom and I got cable, so we could watch Babylon 5. That's it. You know? People are like, oh, you get cable for 1? Yes. We got cable because it meant that big a deal. By the time the boyfriend got done watching all of Babylon 5, all 110 episodes and a couple movies there interspersed, he didn't know what to do with himself at the end. Because there have been movies that have gotten him that way. What Dreams May Come, for instance, gets a lot of people in that sort of like your nose is stopped. You can breathe, but your nose is like, and your throat's incredibly dry, and your eyes are starting to feel like they're falling into the back of your head, but they're warm. You're trying everything you can to just to not cry, and you're trying to figure out some rational reason to not do it. And you're always staying one step ahead of the actual thing of crying, you know. So, and that's what he was. He didn't know what to do with himself. In fact, he, you know, after it digested for a couple of days, he had his parents watch it. And, you know, I'm not necessarily sure if they actually ever got around to watching it. They watched Fartscape. My dad calls it Fartscape. It's actually Farscape. You know, his parents call it Fire Escape because it's kind of a weird word to say. And it's sort of interesting as sci-fi, but, you know, if people are like, oh, well, Farscape is, you know, is just as awesome and blah, blah, blah as Firefly. Okay, I get it. Farscape still ran longer, but, you know, it ran 4 seasons. And in terms of Stargate, you know, if it wasn't for Farscape, you wouldn't have Cameron Mitchell and Bala Maldoran. Well, you probably would have. You just wouldn't have had those characters. Because they starred in sci-fi on Farscape as John Crichton and Aaron Soon. And people have probably seen it because they've seen maybe one episode and they're like, oh, this looks interesting. But if you can, you know, figure out how to get Babylon 5. Or if you've already seen it, good for you. You didn't require my prompting. But, I mean, I still have the last 5 minutes of the last episode on YouTube that I found someone else posted on my favorites. Because it's better. It's a really weird thing to say. And this sounds kind of depressing. Well, it is depressing. In fact, it's quite sad. But I'd much rather watch a video on YouTube than have to resort to any sort of physical violence. And that's probably what it was. The fact that I've had the Inner Light the Inner Light episode with the orchestral sequence from it. And I've had Babylon 5 and whatnot. And all this stuff has gone there. I didn't have to do anything like that some people do in order to feel things. Because these television shows, you know, forced intense emotions upon me that I was able to realize that I did feel things. You know, it's like Star Trek has had such an influence on me that when I'm playing Star Trek Online and I was doing the very last mission of the recent Dominion incursion to the Alpha Quadrant, and you know, the players were getting their butts kicked around Deep Space Nine trying to fend off, and it's effectively an infinite fleet of Dominion ships. You know, it's like the camera, your camera pans back out to space, and it shows a bunch of Dominion ships and Cardassian ships and Federation and Klingon ships fighting each other, and you hear, "Sir, there's another starship coming in." I immediately jumped out of my chair. I stopped DPSing because I yelled, "It's the Enterprise!" And the Enterprise F came in. You know, the Odyssey class that they have made. And, you know, Aaron, the boyfriend, there's his name, by the way. I'm too emotional, and this video's gone on so long, I don't care anymore. He was yelling and happy jazz and, you know, like the goosebumps. It's a game, you know. What is, "Sir, there's another starship coming in." I immediately knew what the next words were. It's the Enterprise. Because that's always when it comes to Star Trek. "Sir, there's another starship coming in." You're pretty much going to be followed by, "It's the Enterprise." You know, if it happened on a shuttle or it happened in it's just, the Enterprise always comes to save the day. So, you know, got all that, and I've rambled a long time. But I'm going to, again, post that this is a really long video so that people know that it's going to be long, but it makes sense, because I felt I needed to talk about this. You know, like I said, I'll put a link to the inner light, the orchestral sequence of the Inner Light down in the comments, and yeah, I'll give a, I don't know, I'll give a little link thing or something to Babylon 5. I don't know where to, probably Amazon in case you want to buy it. Or, you know, you can at least look at the box art. So, you know, if you're going to acquire it from other means, what it looks like, so you know you're not downloading a fake. So anyways, yeah, this is me signing off. I gotta go do Raid Finder for... Ow.